Have you ever felt like you were walking through a dark valley, where each step feels heavier than the last, where hope seems a distant mirage and miracles are just someone else's stories? Have you ever wondered why, just when you need a divine touch the most, life seems to conspire against you with almost cruel intensity? If these words touch something deep within your heart, if they resonate with the silent pain you carry, then you need to know you're not alone on this journey, and, more importantly, what you're experiencing may be the most sacred prelude of your life. I know it hurts. I know there are nights you stare at the ceiling and question if God really hears your prayers, if he sees your tears, if he knows the weight you carry on your shoulders. I know there are times you feel like Job, stripped of everything you considered, secure, questioning not only your circumstances, but the very goodness of God. And I want you to know that these feelings don't make you weak or lacking in faith. They make you profoundly human, and it's in this very humanity that God finds you. The truth I need to share with you today could completely transform how you see your most difficult moments. Because what you're going through, this storm that seems to want to destroy you, may actually be the most sacred process a soul can undergo, the preparation for a miracle. As Billy Graham used to say with his prophetic wisdom, God rarely performs miracles on hearts that haven't first been purified by the fire of adversity. And if you're feeling the intense heat of this fire in your life, it may be because something extraordinary is being prepared, especially for you. Think of Moses, hidden among the reeds of the Nile River, destined for death before even taking his first steps. His mother, in an act of desperate faith, placed him in the waters, trusting that the very river that should have been his tomb would become the path to his salvation. 80 years later, this same man would part the Red Sea and lead an entire people to freedom. But before the miracle of liberation, there was the valley of preparation, the desert of refinement, the years of silence where God was shaping the liberator. Consider David, the young shepherd rejected by his own brothers, considered too insignificant to even be present when the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel. He spent years fleeing in caves, persecuted by the one who should have protected him, living as a fugitive when he had already been anointed to reign. But it was precisely in this period of apparent abandonment that God was forging the heart of a king after his own heart. The caves were actually the divine university where David would learn to completely depend on God. And what about Joseph, the dreamer who saw his own brothers sell him into slavery? How many nights must he have cried in prison, questioning whether the dreams God had given him were real or just illusions of a naive young man? But each betrayal, each injustice, each moment of apparent abandonment was weaving the divine tapestry that would lead him to the throne of Egypt, where he would save not only his family but entire nations from famine. These aren't just ancient stories. Dear brother, dear sister, they are mirrors of the human soul, reflections of the divine pattern God uses to prepare his children for the miracles he has in store. And if you can see your life through this spiritual lens, you'll realize that every difficulty you're facing may actually be a sign that God is preparing something extraordinary for you. But here's the crucial question. God doesn't perform miracles by chance. He doesn't distribute supernatural blessings like cosmic lottery prizes. Each miracle has a purpose. Each divine intervention has a context. Each demonstration of supernatural power happens within a larger plan that our limited minds can barely comprehend. And that's why, before every great miracle, God allows certain experiences to pass through our lives, not to punish or destroy us, but to prepare us, to empower us, to make us worthy vessels of the blessing he has in store. Billy Graham, in his more than 70 years of ministry, observed a consistent pattern in the lives of those who experience God's most extraordinary miracles. He realized that there are 5 specific things God invariably allows or shows before performing a miracle in someone's life. And if you're going through any of these experiences now, you need to be alert, because God may be preparing something supernatural for your life. The first thing God shows you before a miracle is the complete exhaustion of your own strength and resources. Do you remember the widow of Zarephath? When the prophet Elijah came to her, she was literally preparing her last meal. She had only a handful of flour and a little oil, enough for one last meal for her and her son before they died of starvation. It was the end of the line, the last gasp of her human possibilities. And it was precisely at this moment of absolute despair that God chose to perform one of the most extraordinary miracles recorded in Scripture. The flour didn't run out, the oil didn't diminish, and mother and son survived the famine that devastated the land. This is no coincidence, my friend. God frequently allows us to reach the end of our own capabilities, because it's only when our hands are completely empty that we can fully receive what He has to give us. As long as we still trust in our own strength, in our own resources, in our own wisdom, there's always a part of us that attributes success to our own efforts. But when we reach the point where we literally have nothing left, where every door is slammed shut, where every option has been exhausted, then any solution that appears will obviously be supernatural. Maybe you're in that place right now. Maybe you've tried everything within your power. Bills are piling up, problems are multiplying, human solutions have dried up. You've sought medical help, professional counseling, financial loans, support from friends and family, and yet you find yourself in the same place, or even worse. Your marriage seems to be unraveling, your business is failing, your health is deteriorating, your children are drifting away. And amidst it all, a voice whispers in your ear that you're a failure, that God has forgotten you, that you don't deserve divine help. But what if I told you that this exhaustion isn't the end, but the beginning? What if this emptiness in your hands isn't abandonment, but preparation? Because the spiritual truth is that God allows our own strength to be depleted, so that we can discover that His strength is made perfect in weakness. He allows our resources to run out so that we can discover that He is our provider. He allows our solutions to fail so that we can discover that He is the solution. The second thing God shows you before a miracle is a period of apparent silence, where it seems like He's not hearing your prayers. This is perhaps one of the most disconcerting aspects of preparing for a miracle, because it goes against our natural understanding of how God should act. We expect that when we need Him most, He will be more present, more communicative, more active in our lives. But often the opposite happens. Remember Lazarus? Jesus deeply loved Lazarus and his sisters, Martha and Mary. When He received news that his dear friend was gravely ill, what was His reaction? Did He immediately rush to heal him? Did He drop everything to be by the side of someone in need? No. The Scriptures record something seemingly shocking. Jesus stayed where He was for 2 more days, 2 whole days, knowing His friend was dying, knowing that 2 women He loved were desperate, and He seemingly did nothing. Can you imagine the anguish of Martha and Mary during those days? They had sent word to Jesus, certain that He would come immediately. After all, He had healed strangers. He had rescued the unknown. He had shown compassion to multitudes. Surely He would quickly come to help someone so close, someone He called a friend. But the days passed, Lazarus died, and Jesus didn't appear. God's silence must have been deafening, and perhaps that's exactly what you're experiencing now. You've prayed, fasted, sought, cried out, and it seems like your prayers hit the ceiling and come back empty. You see God working in other people's lives. You hear testimonies of miracles and blessings, but in your own life there is only silence. And this silence begins to fuel doubts. Does God not love me as much as I thought? Have my sins created a Barrier between us? Have I missed my chance to receive a miracle? But here's the truth that needs to penetrate deep into your heart. God's silence is not abandonment, it's preparation. It's not rejection, it's divine strategy. It's not because he doesn't care, it's because he cares so much that he's preparing something far greater than you could ever imagine. Because when Jesus finally arrived 4 days after Lazarus' death, he didn't just come to cure an illness. He came to demonstrate that he is the resurrection and the life, that even death has no power over those who are in his hands. If Jesus had arrived sooner, he would have healed Lazarus, and that would have been wonderful. But because he waited, because he allowed the situation to reach the point where there was humanly no hope left, he could demonstrate a power that transcended even death. And this miracle not only blessed Lazarus and his sisters, but became one of the most powerful testimonies of Christ's divinity, strengthening the faith of countless generations. God's silence in your life may be serving the same purpose. He may be allowing your situation to reach a point where only a supernatural miracle can solve it, so that when the solution comes, there's no doubt that it was him who acted. So that your story becomes a powerful testimony that will strengthen the faith of others who will go through similar situations. The third thing God shows you before a miracle is a time of trial and testing, where your faith will be challenged in ways you never imagined. This period is not accidental or cruel. It is absolutely necessary for the miracle that is to come. Because faith is not just a mental confession or a vague hope. It is a spiritual force that, like any force, needs to be tested and strengthened before it can sustain the weight of a genuine miracle. Consider Abraham, called the father of faith. God had promised him that he would be the father of a multitude of nations, that his descendants would be like the stars of heaven and like the sand of the sea. But years passed, decades passed, and Sarah remained barren. Abraham grew old, Sarah grew old, and the promise seemed increasingly impossible from a natural standpoint. At 99 years old, when any natural hope had died, it was that God fulfilled his promise and Sarah conceived Isaac. But the trial didn't end there. After waiting nearly 100 years for this son, after watching him grow and become the joy of his old age, God asked something unimaginable. Take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall tell you. How would you react to such a request? How would you question God, who seems to be asking you to destroy the very promise he has given? But Abraham had learned something fundamental during those years of waiting. He had learned that God is faithful to his promises, even when circumstances completely contradict that faithfulness. So he rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, cut wood for the burnt offering, and went to the place God had shown him. 3 days' journey to Mount Moriah, 3 days to question, to doubt, to give up. But he kept walking because his faith had been tested and refined to the point where he could trust God, even when he couldn't understand God. And you know what happened the moment Abraham raised the knife over his son? God intervened. He provided a ram caught in a thicket by its horns, and he gave Abraham a name that would echo through eternity. In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Because it was precisely when Abraham proved his faith was genuine, that he trusted God above all else, that God provided in a supernatural way. Perhaps you are on that Mount Moriah now. Perhaps God is allowing your faith to be tested in ways you never imagined possible. Perhaps you feel as if he is asking you to give up the very thing he promised. Your marriage is being tested to the limit. Your health is being pushed to the breaking point. Your finances are being challenged to the brink of collapse. And you wonder if God really knows what he's doing. But here is the truth that can sustain your soul in this moment. God never tests your faith to destroy it, but to strengthen it. He never allows trials to defeat you, but to prepare you for the victory that is to come. And if you can remain steadfast during this time of testing, if you can continue trusting even when you can't understand, you will discover that your faith has become a force capable of sustaining miracles that will transform not only your life, but the lives of everyone around you. The fourth thing God shows you before a miracle is a period of isolation, where you will feel as if you are walking alone, misunderstood even by those who should be closest to you. This isolation is not punishment, it is preparation. It is not abandonment, it is refinement. It is during these periods of apparent loneliness that God does his deepest work in our souls, removing all that is not essential, purifying all that is, and preparing us to carry the weight of the blessing to come. Jesus himself experienced this isolation before he began his public ministry. After being baptized by John in the Jordan River, after hearing the Father's voice declaring, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased," he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. 40 days alone, without food, facing not only physical hunger, but the most subtle and dangerous attacks of the enemy. Away from the crowds, away from the disciples he hadn't even called yet, away from any human support. But it was precisely in this period of isolation that Jesus was strengthened for the ministry that would change the world. It was in the desert, facing temptation alone, that he proved he was able to remain faithful to the Father even in the most difficult circumstances. And when he came out of the wilderness, he came out in the power of the Spirit, ready to demonstrate the love and power of God in ways no one had ever seen. Similarly, Joseph experienced years of isolation before becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. Away from his family, misunderstood by his brothers, betrayed by those he trusted, he spent years in prison, seemingly forgotten by God and men. But it was precisely during these years that God was shaping the character that would be needed to govern with wisdom and justice, to forgive with grace, and to save not only a nation, but an entire region from devastating famine. And what about Paul? After his dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus, instead of being immediately launched into apostolic ministry, he spent years in Arabia, seemingly isolated, seemingly unproductive. The other apostles didn't know him. The churches were wary of him, and he found himself in a spiritual no-man's land, no longer a Pharisee, but not yet fully accepted by Christians. But it was during this period that God was preparing him to become the greatest missionary the world has ever seen, the man who would take the gospel to the Gentiles and write a large portion of the New Testament. Perhaps you are in this period of isolation now. Perhaps you feel misunderstood by your family, rejected by old friends, questioned by those who should be supporting you. Perhaps your circumstances have forced you into a loneliness you would never choose, where the nights are long and the days are empty of meaningful companionship. And amidst all of this, a voice whispers that you have been abandoned, that you are worthless, that no one cares about you. But I want you to know that this isolation can actually be the most sacred environment where God does his deepest work. It is when we are alone with him that we learn to hear his voice above all other voices. It is when we have nowhere else to run that we learn to run to him. It is when we feel weakest that we discover that his strength is sufficient. And it is during these periods that God prepares us for a miracle that will require not only faith, but spiritual maturity, not only hope, but divine wisdom. The fifth and final thing God shows you before a miracle is an intensification of the spiritual battle in your life. You'll start experiencing more frequent and intense attacks from the enemy, not because God has abandoned you, but because the devil senses something significant is about to happen. The enemy always intensifies its attacks when it's about to lose ground. And if you're experiencing intense spiritual warfare in your life, it could be a sign that you're on the verge of a miracle. Remember what happened to Job. He was described as the most upright and God-fearing man on earth. He lived a blessed life, with a large family, great wealth, and an impeccable reputation. But then, suddenly, everything crumbled. In a single day, he lost all his children, all his possessions, and soon afterward was afflicted with a terrible disease that covered him with sores from head to toe. His wife, in despair, advised him to curse God and die. His friends, well-intentioned but misguided, accused him of hidden sin. But what Job didn't know, and what we know through the biblical narrative, is that his tragedy had begun in a conversation between God and Satan. The devil had questioned the genuineness of Job's faith, suggesting that he only served God because he was blessed. "Stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." And God, confident in the integrity of his servant, allowed Job to be tested. This wasn't a case of God being cruel or indifferent. It was a case of God knowing that Job possessed a genuine faith that could withstand even the apparent loss of everything. And when Job proved his faith was real, when he demonstrated that he would worship God even in the absence of material blessings, God not only restored everything he had lost, but gave him double. His later years were more blessed than his first, and his story became an eternal testament to God's faithfulness. Similarly, Jesus experienced intensified spiritual attacks before his most powerful miracles. Before feeding the 5,000, he faced opposition from the Pharisees. Before raising Lazarus, he faced criticism and misunderstanding, and before the greatest victory of all, his resurrection, he faced the agony of Gethsemane, the betrayal of Judas, the denial of Peter, and the horror of the crucifixion. If you're going through intense spiritual battle in your life right now, if it feels like hell itself has mobilized against you, I want you to know that this can actually be an encouraging sign. It may mean you're so close to a miracle that the enemy is desperate to prevent it. It may mean that God is about to do something so powerful in your life that all the forces of darkness have mobilized to try and thwart it. But here's the truth that can sustain you in this war. The devil only fights like this when he's losing. He only intensifies his attacks when he knows he's about to be defeated. And if he's fighting so fiercely against you, it may be because he knows God is about to perform a miracle that will not only transform your life, but become a powerful testimony that will strengthen the faith of many others. These 5 things, the depletion of your own resources, the apparent silence of God, the testing of your faith, the period of isolation, and the intensification of spiritual battle, are not signs that God has forgotten you. They are signs that he is preparing something extraordinary. They are indications that you are being molded and prepared to receive and sustain a miracle that will transcend your greatest expectations. But here's the crucial part you need to understand. Your response during this period of preparation will determine the magnitude of the miracle God can perform. If you give up during the depletion, if you lose faith during the silence, if you fail the test, if you rebel in isolation, or if you surrender in the spiritual battle, you may miss the opportunity for which all this was preparing you. But if you can remain steadfast, if you can continue trusting even when you can't understand, if you can praise even in pain, pray even in silence, forgive even in betrayal, love even in rejection, then you will become a vessel prepared for honor, sanctified and fit for the Master's use, and prepared for every good work. Remember that God's miracles are not just demonstrations of power, they are demonstrations of love. Each miracle aims not only to solve a problem, but to reveal the character of God. And for a miracle to fully accomplish its purpose, it needs to happen through someone who has been prepared to receive it with gratitude, use it wisely, and share it generously. That's why God allows these periods of preparation, not to punish us, but to prepare us, not to break us, but to mold us. not to destroy us, but to empower us for something greater than we ever imagined possible. And if you're going through some or all of these experiences right now, I want you to know that there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is purpose in your pain. There is meaning in your suffering, and there is a miracle with your name on it, waiting for the perfect moment to manifest in your life. But until then, you need to remain steadfast. You need to keep praying, even when it seems like your prayers aren't getting past the ceiling. You need to keep worshiping, even when you don't feel like praising. You need to keep loving, even when you feel rejected. You need to keep giving, even when you feel empty. Because it is in these seemingly contradictory attitudes that your faith is strengthened and your capacity to receive miracles is expanded. Remember that you're not going through this alone. The same God who cared for Abraham on Mount Moriah is caring for you. The same God who sustained Joseph in prison is sustaining you. The same God who strengthened Jesus in the desert is strengthening you. And the same God who raised Lazarus from the dead has the power to resurrect any dead area of your life. You need to know that your enemies may have conspired against you, but God can use even their conspiracies for your good. Your circumstances may seem impossible, but God specializes in impossibilities. Your situation may seem hopeless, but God is the very definition of hope, and however dark the night you are going through, the dawn is coming. So instead of focusing on the problem, focus on the God who is bigger than any problem. Instead of focusing on the storm, focus on the one who can calm any storm with a word. Instead of looking at your limitations, look to the one whose power knows no bounds. Because when you shift your focus, when you lift your eyes from the circumstances to the creator of the circumstances, something supernatural begins to happen in your heart. And maybe, just maybe, you are much closer to your miracle than you realize. Maybe you are in the final yards of the marathon, and it's precisely when you want to give up that you need to run harder. Maybe you are in the final inches of the excavation, and it's when your hands are most sore that you need to dig deeper. Maybe you are in the final hour of the night, and it's when the darkness is densest that the dawn is closest. Because the truth is that God has a perfect timing for everything. He doesn't arrive too early when we could still solve things on our own, and he never arrives too late when there is no hope left. He arrives at precisely the right moment, when his intervention will be recognized as supernatural, when his help will be received with gratitude, and when his glory will be magnified through our story. So my dear brother, my dear sister, if you recognize your life in any of the situations I described today, I want you to know that it's no coincidence that these words have reached you. It may be that God is using this moment to alert you, to encourage you, to prepare you for something extraordinary that he is about to do in your life. Don't give up now. Don't stop praying now. Don't stop believing now, because you may be closer to your miracle than you have ever been. Your victory may be just a day away, just a prayer away, just an act of faith away. And when your miracle arrives, and it will, you will understand why you had to go through everything you went through. You will understand why every tear was necessary, why every sleepless night had a purpose, why every moment of pain was contributing to a greater good. And you will kneel before God, not only in gratitude for the miracle, but in awe of the divine wisdom that used even your most difficult moments to prepare something beautiful. So tell me, are you ready for your miracle? Are you willing to trust God even when you can't understand him? Do you have the courage to keep walking even when the path seems impossible? Because if your answer is yes, then prepare your heart, strengthen your faith, and keep your eyes fixed on the horizon, because God is about to do something extraordinary in your life. But let me be even more specific about how you can prepare to receive the miracle God has in store for you. Because it's not enough to just know that a miracle is coming. You need to be in a spiritual position to receive it, sustain it, and multiply it in the lives of others. First, you need to understand that your attitude during the preparation period is crucial. The way you respond to difficulties, trials, God's silence, and spiritual battles not only determines whether you will receive the miracle, but also determines the impact that miracle will have on your life and the lives of those around you. When you face the exhaustion of your own strength, instead of falling into despair, you need to see this as an opportunity to discover God's infinite strength. It's easy to trust God when we have other options, but it's when all options run out that our trust in Him becomes pure and powerful. It's when we have nowhere else to run that we learn to truly run to Him. Think of the woman with the issue of blood who had spent all her resources on doctors for 12 years. When she touched the hem of Jesus' garment, it wasn't just a desperate touch. It was a touch of pure faith because she had reached the point where she knew that only Jesus could help her. And it was precisely this faith, purified by suffering, that activated the healing power of Jesus in her life. Similarly, when you experience God's apparent silence instead of interpreting it as abandonment, you need to learn to see it as an invitation to deeper intimacy. It is in the moments of silence that we learn to hear God's whispers. It's when He seems distant that we develop a spiritual sensitivity capable of perceiving His presence in the subtlest of things. Remember Elijah on Mount Horeb. After one of the greatest spiritual victories of his life, defeating the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, he found himself fleeing from Jezebel, hiding in a cave, asking to die. And when God finally manifested Himself, it wasn't in the rushing wind that split the mountains. It wasn't in the earthquake that shook the earth. It wasn't in the fire that consumed everything. God manifested Himself in a still, small voice, in an almost imperceptible whisper. Elijah had learned to hear God in dramatic moments, but he needed to learn to hear Him in silence as well. And that's exactly what you are learning now. God is teaching you to recognize His voice even when He's not shouting, to sense His presence even when He's not manifesting in obviously supernatural ways. When you go through a trial of your faith, instead of questioning why God is allowing this, you need to ask what He's trying to develop in you through it. Each test is a growth opportunity, each trial a chance for strengthening, each challenge an invitation to discover reserves of faith and courage you didn't know you possessed. Abraham didn't know, when he began ascending Mount Moriah with Isaac, that God would provide a substitute. He simply obeyed because he had learned, through years of relationship with God, that divine faithfulness was more reliable than his own circumstances. And it was this mature, tested, and proven faith that made him the father of nations and an eternal example of trusting in God. During your season of isolation, instead of feeling abandoned, you need to learn to see this time as a sacred privilege. It's when we're alone with God that He can speak to us without the interference of other voices. It's when we have no human distractions that we can fully focus on the divine voice. It's when we have nowhere else to run that we learn to find in God everything we need. Jesus regularly sought moments of solitude, not because He disliked people, but because He knew that it was in silence and solitude that His connection with the Father was strengthened. He withdrew to lonely places and prayed, Luke records. If Jesus Himself needed these moments of isolation to strengthen Himself spiritually, how much more do we need them? And when the spiritual battle intensifies, instead of being intimidated by the enemy's attacks, you need to interpret this as confirmation that you're on the right path. The devil doesn't waste ammunition attacking people who pose no threat to the kingdom of darkness. If you're being intensely attacked, it's because your life has the potential to make a significant impact for God's kingdom. Paul understood this when he wrote, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." He wasn't discouraging Christians, but alerting them to the reality of spiritual warfare and equipping them with the necessary weapons to win. But there's something else you need to understand about this season of preparation. It's not just about you. God is preparing you not only to receive a miracle, but to be a conduit through which others will also receive miracles. He's using your experiences to develop in you compassion, wisdom, patience, and faith, qualities that will be essential when you become an instrument of blessing in the lives of others. Joseph didn't spend years in prison just to become governor of Egypt. He went through that experience to develop the character and wisdom needed to save not just a nation, but an entire region from famine. His tears in prison were a divine investment in the salvation of millions who didn't even know they needed saving. Similarly, your tears, your struggles, your moments of doubt, and your acts of faith are being woven by God into a tapestry that will not only change your life, but impact generations. Your future testimony will strengthen the faith of people you don't even know yet. Your victory will encourage others not to give up during their own seasons of preparation. That's why you can't give up now. It's not just your own blessing that's at stake, but the blessing of all those God wants to reach through your story. When you give up, you're not only depriving yourself of the miracle God has for you, you're depriving others of the blessings that would flow through your transformed life. But I want to be even more practical with you. How exactly should you respond during this season of preparation? What concrete attitudes should you cultivate to position yourself properly for the miracle that's coming? First, cultivate an attitude of gratitude, even in the most difficult circumstances. I'm not talking about a superficial gratitude that denies the reality of pain, but a deep gratitude that recognizes that even your most painful experiences are being used by God for your good. Paul and Silas didn't sing in prison because they were happy to be beaten and imprisoned, but because they trusted that God was in control even of that seemingly unjust situation. Second, maintain a consistent prayer life, even when it seems like your prayers aren't being heard. Prayer during difficult times isn't just about asking for help. It's about maintaining your connection with God, strengthening your faith, and positioning your heart to receive what He has for you. Daniel prayed for 21 days before receiving an answer from the angel, but it was precisely this persistence in prayer that prepared him to receive the revelation God wanted to give him. Third, continue serving others even when you yourself are in need of help. There's something powerful that happens when we give from our little, when we serve from our own need, when we bless others even while we're hurting. The widow of Zarephath gave Elijah the last meal she had, and it was precisely this act of sacrificial generosity that activated the miracle of supernatural provision. Fourth, guard your heart against bitterness and resentment. It's easy to allow difficulties to harden our hearts, for betrayals to make us cynical, for disappointments to cause us to lose our capacity to love. But a bitter heart is like a cracked vessel. It can't retain the blessings God wants to pour out. Joseph could have become bitter because of his brother's betrayal, but he chose forgiveness, and it was this bitterness-free heart that enabled him to be used by God to save the family that had rejected him. Fifth, maintain your positive confession of faith, declaring God's promises even when circumstances contradict those promises. Abraham waited against hope and did not waver at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith, giving glory to God. His words have creative power, and when you declare God's promises over your life, you are cooperating with divine power to transform your reality. Now, let me share with you some specific signs that your miracle may be very near. Because just As there are signs that precede a miracle, there are also signs that indicate it's about to manifest. The first sign is a supernatural peace that begins to invade your heart, even in the midst of the storm. It's as if something deep within your spirit knows that victory is near, even if your mind can't yet comprehend how it will be possible. This peace isn't based on circumstances. It's based on a spiritual revelation that God is about to act. Jesus experienced this peace the night before his crucifixion, when he told the disciples, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." He knew that within a few hours he would face the greatest agony of his life, but he also knew that this agony would lead to the greatest victory of all time. The second sign is an increase in your ability to pray and worship, even when you don't feel like it. It's as if the Holy Spirit begins to intercede through you with inexpressible groanings, paving the way for the miracle that is to come. Hannah, mother of Samuel, prayed with such intensity in the temple that the priest Eli thought she was drunk, but in reality she was being moved by the Spirit of God in a prayer that would result in the birth of the prophet who would change a nation. The third sign is the appearance of prophetic confirmations through dreams, visions, words from fellow Christians, or even through circumstances that seem like coincidences, but that you recognize as signs from God. Your greatest victory is yet to come. Your most extraordinary miracle is still being prepared, and when it arrives, you will know it was worth every tear, every prayer, every moment of struggle. Because the same God who turned the cross into a crown, who turned a tomb into resurrection, who turned defeat into victory, is about to transform your situation in a way that will surpass your wildest dreams. So answer me one last time. Are you ready to see God do the impossible in your life? Are you prepared to witness a miracle that will change not only your story, but the story of everyone you love? Because if you are, then get ready, because your miracle is closer than you think.